It was a clear black night, a clear white moon. Warren G was on the streets trying to consume. And with those few words, Warren G painted a picture, beginning the story of one crazy night in the LBC that will become a G-Funk classic. Today I'm breaking down Regulate by Warren G. We'll talk about the story of how this song was made, the G-Funk sound, the samples used, and see how this song is a perfect example of mutual respect between musicians and artists across multiple generations and genres. Well, mostly. Now, there are two versions of this video. On Patreon, you'll get the full thing, extended sections, more musical examples, and additional commentary. Here on YouTube, it's a little shorter, especially the music. Alright, first, let's talk about G-Funk. G-Funk is the West Coast hip-hop subgenre that emerged in the early 90s. It contrasts directly with the East Coast boom bap sound. While boom bap can be a little more gritty, in-your-face, New York vibe, G-Funk is more mellow, incorporating synths, heavy bass, and a chilled-out California vibe. Artists like Above the Law, DJ Quick, and Ice Cube helped pioneer this new West Coast sound. And then, of course, there's Dr. Dre and his 1992 album, The Chronic. This is a monumental album for music history, for hip-hop, and for G-Funk, and merits its own video entirely. But for now, let's take a listen to Nothing But a G-Thing by Dr. Dre and Snoop Dogg from The Chronic. The Chronic was the debut album for not only Dr. Dre, but also Death Row Records. A lot of people worked on this album, including Dr. Dre's stepbrother, Warren G. With his ability to produce and rap, Warren G was ready to go. As he explained, Death Row had a lot of artists. They had Snoop, the Dog Pound, the Lady of Rage, and there was other artists that was also on the label. So it was a big list and a long wait. I didn't want to wait that long, so I started branching off and doing my own thing. I could rap at the same time, so I just took that. DJ Quick was doing it, Dre was doing it, so I adopted the same formula that they were doing and did my own style. So with an MPC, a crate of records, some synths, and a VCR, Warren G set out to make what would become the song Regulate. This song was recorded in Warren G's apartment in Long Beach. It was made on an MPC 60 with some samples that we're gonna get all the way into in just a second, but it was produced by Warren G, who then invited Nate Dogg over to record with him. The whole song has a back and forth between Warren G rapping and Nate Dogg singing, recounting a crazy night out, including Warren G getting jumped, Nate Dogg coming in to save him and regulating the situation, and meeting up with girls after. Then on the outro, they talk about how they're stepping into the G-Funk era. It's funk on a whole new level. I love that it's a G-Funk song with a closing verse celebrating G-Funk itself. The back and forth between Warren G and Nate Dogg was directly inspired by what Snoop and Dre did on Nothing But a G-Thing. The vocals were recorded in Warren G's apartment quickly. The song came together very naturally. The vocals, however, were re-recorded later, not only for the sound quality, but also the lyrics. The new version was tweaked to be a little more radio-friendly. The original, rougher version has never been heard, and Warren G himself has no idea where that version might be. The irony, of course, is that even though it was re-recorded to be more radio-friendly, it was still censored. Specifically the word cold, as in when Nate Dogg says, Nate Dogg is about to make some bodies turn cold. This was an example of double standards, as other white artists could make uncensored songs about the same subject. Take, for example, the Johnny Cash song Delia's Gone from the 1994 album American Recordings, which is much more graphic, but no, the word cold, that's too much. Now let's talk about the music. The primary sample on Regulate is I Keep Forgettin by Michael McDonald from 1982. Warren G loved the song and had heard it when his parents played it growing up, but came across the record again when he bought a crate of records from a guy outside Roscoe's. As Warren G himself said, I'm a fan. I'm still a fan. I really love his work, man. I think he's one of the greatest of all time. His voice is incredible. If you're somehow not familiar with Michael McDonald's iconic voice, let's take a listen to I Keep Forgettin.
I keep forgetting we're not in love anymore.
Michael McDonald is often categorized now as Yacht Rock. That term wasn't coined until years later in 2005. Up until that point, it was known as the West Coast sound. Essentially, it's 70s and 80s soft rock, incredible production, songwriting, the vocals, feels super smooth, it just feels great. Artists like Ambrosia, Little River Band, Kenny Loggins, or even Toto and Steely Dan could be considered yacht rock. And Michael McDonald and I Keep Forgettin would definitely be yacht rock. Again, this is a label that was applied in retrospect many years after. Warren G in 1994 didn't call it yacht rock. Nobody did. The point is, yacht rock rules, Michael McDonald rules, and everybody knows it, especially Warren G. So when you hear Regulate, this is the primary sample, but Warren G has also added drums, synths, and one other element that we'll come back to in a second. But within this sample, within the Michael McDonald song, is some of the best musicians in music history. Not only Michael McDonald on vocals and keys, but Greg Phillinganes on clavinet, Steve Lukather on guitar, Jeff Porcaro on drums, and Louis Johnson on bass. And, not everyone takes kindly to having their music sampled, but Michael McDonald, as we've previously established, is the man. So here's what Mikey McD had to say about Warren G's Regulate. Sorry, did I say Mikey McD? That just kind of came out. Nobody calls him that. I don't need to make that a thing. Anyway, here's the quote. Rap is like any other genre. There are the people who are very creative with it and do remarkable things, and then there's that whole quadrant that sound alike. There's great stuff that's taken the genre to a new level over the years, and Regulate was one of those tracks that was kind of a landmark. And it makes sense that he was a fan of how Warren G had reworked the song because Michael McDonald had done the exact same thing. Here's Chuck Jackson's 1962 song, I Keep Forgettin'.
I keep forgetting you don't love me no more.
This is not the same song as Mikey McD's, but it's similar enough that Lieber and Stoller, the songwriters of the Chuck Jackson version, also got credit for Michael's version, just how Michael McDonald got credit for Warren G's version. This is one of the purest examples of musicians, artists, and writers having mutual respect for each other across multiple generations and genres. Starting in 1962 with Chuck Jackson, followed by Michael McDonald in 1982, ending with Warren G in 1994. Each artist builds on the last, giving credit where credit is due, and bringing the song to new ears each time. This is how sampling should be done. Well, except for one thing. There is another sample in this song that wasn't initially cleared. It's right at the beginning of Regulate, and it's from an artist who is one of the most sampled in music history. This song is Sign of the Times by Bob James, and here it is in Regulate. While the Michael McDonald sample was cleared, for one reason or another, the Bob James one wasn't. And it was actually Bob's nephew who caught it and called him to let him know. There is, of course, one other sample in this song right at the beginning. It comes from the 1988 movie Young Guns.
We work for Mr. Tunstall as regulators. We regulate any stealing of his property. We're damn good, too. But you can't be any geek off the street. Gotta be handy with the steel, if you know what I mean. Earn your keep.
So Warren G picked up this movie, connected the VCR direct to his MPC, and sampled directly into what would become Regulate. Regulate was released first on the soundtrack to the movie Above the Rim, and later on June 7th, 1994, Warren G's debut album Regulate G-Funk Era, which catapulted this song to number 2 on the Billboard Hot 100. When you look back at the G-Funk era, Regulate is one of the best examples of the genre. It's so smooth, but at the same time tough. It's the story of Warren G getting jumped and Nate Dogg coming in to regulate the situation, ending with a verse about G-Funk, how the rhythm is the bass and the bass is the treble. It's so good. It's a stone cold classic. Wait, what? For real? So just a few months before Warren G was releasing Regulate on the West Coast, ushering in the G-Funk era, over on the East Coast, there was another MC who released a classic album. It's a collection of some of the best rhymes and best beats from incredible East Coast producers. I'm talking, of course, about Nas's Illmatic. One of those producers was Large Professor, and if you look at the song, it ain't hard to tell. The progression from the demo to the record version to the remix, it's in this video right here.